on Friday. They are another reminder of the violence that we've experienced throughout this year in different cities, and which is happening every day in many parts of our world. They are a reminder of the extreme hatred of the very few who would do violence to the innocent, regardless of faith or culture, to people even as they're going around their daily business, at a rock concert, or sitting in a cafe. The events of Paris are quite poignant because they're close to home. City of Paris is very much a city like London, a major international city within Europe. They remind us, of course, of the events of 7/7 here. Also close to home is the Calais camp, where again this last week, I shed tears of despair. I visited again to see again with a larger group of people the incredible despair in the lives of so many who are living on the camp at Calais, mostly young people, people who fled from wars and famines, from regimes, ordinary people who've had no involvement in the politics of their country, but are simply seeking to flee a place which promises them no future of work or study, and particularly promises no future based on peace. Tears of despair also at the squalor of that place. I visited shanty dwellings, shanty settlements in different parts of the world, in South Africa, in the Philippines. But to see a settlement like that, 35 minutes on the train from Folkestone, just the other side of the English Channel, in the heart of Europe, surrounded by so much wealth, just as people are going over to buy their champagne for weddings, there are people living in squalor, with appalling sanitary conditions, reliant on charity. People have been traumatised by journeys to get there, journeys across sea, across land, victims of racism and abuse. People are traumatised. People have lost loved ones. I'm particularly struck by a conversation with a young Syrian man who's now has asylum and living in Wales. His father was a victim of a political murder in Syria, and his mother and 17-year-old sister are at the camp. Whereas he can visit them, he can do nothing to be, it seems, reunified with them. And he feels desperately hopeless. Tears of despair. These are times which our reading today seems to describe. Times of distress, as described in the book of Daniel. Time as described in the reading from Mark's Gospel, where there are wars and rumours of wars. Tears of despair. But also tears of hope. It's very emotional to be again in Calais this week and to be there with an interfaith group. I led a delegation of Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus and Sikhs. And it was very powerful to be there in an act of solidarity with the people living on the camp. It was powerful to be sharing in humanity. It was powerful to see those signs of hope when human beings reach out to one another and seek to try to make change in order to bring around peace and justice. Signs of hope from people like Musa, who I met this evening. She's a Syrian, last evening, she's a Syrian woman as part of the Syrian Solidarity Campaign. She described how when her brother was fleeing Syria and was crossing the Mediterranean, they were able to track his boat through use of the GPS on his phone. And they didn't tell their mother about this, but they were following the boat and they could see that the boat was moving across the Mediterranean, and then at some point it stopped and it started to move backwards. And he was one of the lucky ones who, even though there were problems with that boat, the young man I met in Calais on Thursday, he told me that he himself had been in a boat that capsized and he'd seen about 160 people die, before his eyes. He was one of the ones to be rescued. And even with the trauma that so many Syrians have gone through in fleeing that country and the regime there, as well as the presence of IS there, Musa said, please do not give up on the Syrian cause. She said 300,000 people have died in Syria already for that cause. And we owe it to them to try to seek a just and peaceful solution for Syria, and not a return to oppressive regime. And really inspiring to see the hope of such a woman, that she's prepared to continue to struggle, to shed her own tears of hope as she seeks to bring change and encourage others to support her organisation and people in Syria. Tears of hope when, as has happened over the last 24 hours, many friends have been in touch with me and to suggest that we engage in vigils and acts of solidarity together to condemn the violence. Many Muslim friends have been in touch with me. Many have made a special effort to condemn violence, even though these are people, of course, have nothing to do whatsoever with IS or any form of hateful Islamic extremism. A lovely friend of mine, Anjali, who told me that even she had someone whisper at her in the street yesterday, calling her a terrorist. A most beautiful British young woman who does really amazing charitable works. And then, this is the kind of response that she's getting in relation to an attack in Paris, which has nothing to do with her, or indeed the intentions of her faith whatsoever. Tears of hope Hebrews today, the reading speaks of a new time. It speaks that we must have a confidence that we are entering into a new and living way. And it reminds us of the notion in the Christian tradition that we live between the despair of the now and the hope of the things to come. Someone's put it, there's a difference between talk of the apocalypse, an end time of despair, and the Christian theology of eschatology, which is the Christian understanding that we hope for a future time which we believe is founded on God's reign of justice and of peace. And that's what Hebrews reminds us of today, that we are to hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, the hope that is promised. And we are to, in the meantime, spur one another on towards love and good deeds. This is the process of solidarity. This is the process of fellowship. This is the process of communion, whereby we strengthen one another in hope. I love that phrase, let us not give up meeting together, in that reading from Hebrews. We meet together in worship, or we meet together in solidarity with others across the Christian community, across faiths, with people of no faith. We are building hope for a future time that is based on God's reign of love and peace. We shed tears of hope as we look forward to the beauty of that time. Tears of despair, tears of hope, and tears of action. Building a future based on hope is costly. This week in the Church of England cycle of prayers, we are remembering 4 saints from the UK, 4 saints of the past. First, tomorrow, the 16th of November, a holy day, we remember St. Margaret of Scotland. She was exiled in Hungary when the Danes ruled England. She returned to marry the King of Scotland, and then she devoted herself to feeding the poor and to the reform of the church. We remember too Hugh of Lincoln on the 17th of November, who again was involved in the reform of his diocese and in caring for the poor, the lepers, the oppressed, and who was very involved in opposition to the persecution of Jews. We remember Hilda, Abbess of Whitby, who presided over the reconciliation between the Roman and Celtic traditions in Britain in 1664. And we remember Edmund, King of the East Angles, who died fighting the Vanes and refusing to renounce his Christian faith. All examples from British history of people who've been strong in their faith, who've held to that hope who've taken actions which have been costly. Last evening I was with some very inspirational people, and I thought to myself, well, these are saints in the UK today. Not only Musa, who I mentioned, but also Rita, who runs an organisation providing practical support to refugees, who's helping us with legal advice at our Migrants Support Centre here in Walthamstow. Ulrike, who works tirelessly seeking to support the work of Amnesty and support political and other prisoners in oppressive regimes throughout the world today. People like Jean, our member of the European Parliament, who again is a champion for so many causes of justice and for all those who are oppressed today. And Micheline, a Congolese refugee who has formed a project in Islington which provides so much benefit to the local community. All these people who've engaged in actions which have been costly. I know they've shed tears. And it's those tears of action which we know in our own lives. So many of us here are engaged in different forms of good works, charitable works, the kind of works described in Hebrews, love and good deeds. As a community here at St Barnabas, again, we seek to model together what it means to be a diverse community who share in love and hope with one another and who seek to act in our local community to bring peace and love to others. So as we continue to be mindful today of our tears of despair for the situation in Paris, for so many tragic situations in our world today, let us also have those tears of hope which inspire us to costly action, and as we seek to build a world that is based on God's reign of justice and peace.